Thank you so much, and also thank you for Hedayah for providing me the opportunity to present some findings from a recent report that we published earlier this year on international evaluation practices as part of the PREVA project. I should briefly mention this work would not have been completed without the contributions of two of my colleagues who unfortunately can't be here today, Sarah Brezen, also from the Global Public Policy Institute, and Lotta Ralph, who is a researcher at the Peace and Research Institute, Frankfurt. Very quickly, because we touched upon some of these points already, and also based on the comments that we heard yesterday, why are we even talking about evaluation? Why are we here today? Why is there a distinct panel on this topic? And why does it need more attention around the issue of evaluation? So when we talk about evaluation, and this came through in some of the comments yesterday as well, unfortunately, it's still very much perceived as an accountability mechanism, as a mechanism for funders to generate evidence on the efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability of their funded initiatives and make decisions on funding priorities. What we collectively need to become better at is changing the narrative around what evaluation can do, the added value it also has when it comes to learning. And that is added value not only for practitioners, importantly, but also for decision makers to better understand what works, for whom, why, and under which conditions, and to really strengthen ongoing and future efforts in the prevention space to contribute to more safer and more resilient societies. I want to very briefly give a little bit of context on the PREVA project. This is a research and transfer project set in Germany, funded by the Interior Ministry, which focuses on designing and developing new formats and structures around evaluation and quality assurance in extremism prevention, civic education, and democracy promotion. PREVA understands itself as an open network of, we currently have about 15 project partners, most of which focus on evaluation issues in Germany. And where the Global Public Policy Institute was asked to come in collaboration with our colleague from the Peace and Research Institute in Frankfurt, was to expand our perspective on what we know about evaluation and look elsewhere. So we bring in sort of this international perspective. That's why you see the comparison between Germany and the world map. And we do this by conducting an international expert survey, which ran last year between July and August 2023, with the aim to identify good practices, common challenges, and also innovative and promising developments to move evaluation forward. We really strongly believe in the value of mutual learning. A lot of the challenges that we face when we talk about PCV evaluation are shared across contexts, and that's where we see the value of our project to come in. This is a recurring monitoring, which means the survey is running again this year. Some of my colleagues at GPPI are responsible for that. And in addition, there are also thematic studies which pick up on key issues that we identified in the survey responses and allow us to go into a bit more in-depth on certain evaluation issues. We recently published a study that I'll get back to in a second on capacity building. There's another study currently in development looking at different financing mechanisms for evaluation, and future thematic studies are also underway. Very briefly on the survey itself, we had a total of 37 experts with expertise on evaluation and PCVE work that answered to a total of 14 countries. If you see the world map on the right, you'll see in green highlighted different countries that are included in the country sample. This survey design has an explorative approach, which means that when we talk about the findings in a second, we do not aim to representatively determine the complete evaluation of PCVE landscape in any of these countries, but rather really assess good ideas and things that we could pick up for the German prevention landscape and potentially implement ourselves. I want to start with something positive, because when you read PCVE evaluation literature, there's a lot of pessimism around the current state of affairs. Positive things first. Our experts indicated in many contexts there is a growing recognition for the value of evaluation. And I think the fact that there were multiple people yesterday emphasizing the need for more conversations around evaluation is evident of that. Also, to see more events of these that put evaluation on the agenda is also an example of this positive trend. The reality still is that evaluation practices in many countries are not yet as developed as in many other fields, specifically public health or criminology. So there is still a lot we need to do. But we really believe that evaluation, if it's done well, can help us to make logics of action and theories of change explicit and work towards an improved mutual understanding. We therefore encourage all stakeholders to approach evaluation on the very basis as an opportunity to build trust and work towards more coherent and effective prevention efforts. We already heard it. Our survey results confirm that funding remains a significant issue. So generally, evaluation are underfunded. When we asked our experts how evaluation are being funded in practice, they indicated that most of the time, funders either expect projects to reserve a specific budget line for evaluation purposes. In several countries, this usually amounts to 5 to 10%. If this is a useful scale, we can also discuss. Or sometimes when governments request an evaluation, they also provide additional funding. What is currently missing, however, are dedicated financing mechanisms that would really incentivize implementers to be curious about what they can learn from evaluation and conduct evaluation out of their own initiatives. We have an example in the Netherlands, the so-called reinforcement funds, from which municipalities can request money for PCVE efforts and also additional money for evaluation purposes more specifically, but these are really the exception. We also see that when there are budget constraints, evaluation quickly loses in priority or is even abandoned altogether. A lack of funding also affects the amount of methods or the selection of methods. So evaluators sometimes are, for instance, forced to make a decision against more robust evaluation designs that are more cost-intensive. Implementers that are requested to evaluate on their own account also are not always able to seek external and more experienced help, which also, of course, requires additional funding. Therefore, making sure that adequate funding is available is out of utmost importance to improve the quality of evaluations currently in the field. This means that funders need to be supporting implementers more strategically if they are expecting them to cover evaluation costs, and also think about the development of dedicated funding mechanisms to really support also evaluations out of the own initiative of implementers. The extent to which evaluation results are actually used to drive policy improvement and also practice improvement remains unclear. Our experts indicated that sometimes evaluation results are discussed within government circles, but the extent to which these discussions then actually lead to a decision-making process was often intransparent. Due to the absence of more formal requirements and incentives to integrate lessons learned more systematically, uptake, so using evaluation results to drive improvement in learning, often depends on the initiative of individuals. This can be practitioners and also researchers, which, for instance, share lessons learned in conversations at conferences like today or in academic articles. But this really also means that those individuals need to have the resources to do that. That can be administrative, like, for instance, travel costs, but also staff costs to implement lessons learned and learnings after the project has ended. It's really important, therefore, to ensure that all evaluations follow learning strategies that have clearer uptake mechanisms, and uptake mechanisms that happen within government circles also need to be more transparent. Transparency is important because we want to avoid the perception that evaluation is an accountability mechanism that doesn't have any added value in terms of learning. So really make sure that it becomes clearer where learning takes place, to also ensure that implementers have an interest in conducting meaningful evaluations because they know it will have an impact at the end. Evaluation results are sometimes published, but it doesn't happen systematically. In the US, for instance, Department of Homeland Security runs the TVTP. I'm always struggling with this, Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program, through which evaluations are always published. In Indonesia, we have the BNPT, the National Counterterrorism Agency, which annually publishes an evaluation report of its initiatives. These are just some examples, but there are many reasons why there's still limited evaluation transparency. Particularly, funder holds significant power, both as obstructors and enablers of sharing evaluation results, and the reason for that are often shared with concerns that also implementers have. Mostly, of course, relating to the fear of negative consequences if evaluation results are not satisfactory, This can be a loss of reputation, but for implementers also the very real concern that funding will be discontinued if the evaluation results are not positive, whatever you also consider positive in that context. And then, of course, there are also concerns about data protection, so you would want to avoid placing responsibility for negative results on particular staff members, or generally, especially in the current climate, protect the anonymity of staff members. Experts suggested the need for more evaluation databases that help consolidate findings and make them more accessible to a broader audience. So our suggestion would be to, wherever it's possible, support the sharing of evaluation results that can be anonymized, or at least partial results. So for instance, infographics, summaries, etc., to at least share some lessons from the overall report and make them accessible in an evaluation database. Then we have the issue of capacity building. That's another challenge that we already touched upon. A lot of implementers don't have extensive evaluation expertise and skill set. We would like to raise awareness for the fact that this does not only affect implementers, but also decision makers, which, for instance, are tasked with creating evaluation tenders or evaluation frameworks when they want to evaluate the PCVE programs. So capacity building is really needed for a variety of stakeholders, which we should keep in mind when we talk about skills and tools that need to be developed. We talk about methodological and practical skills, some of which we already discussed a little bit, so I'm not going to go into depth on that. Currently, we have various evaluation support tools. Yesterday, someone mentioned that more and more guides are being available. We see specifically an increase in toolkits over the more recent years. We also have evaluation trainings, an evaluation help desk, as Eileen explained what the ICCT has set up. All of these tools offer different benefits and disadvantages, and it's really important that before developing new tools, funders of capacity building support tools think carefully about the needs that currently exist and which tools are the most suitable to address these gaps. Very briefly, I already mentioned it, one of the thematic studies that we recently published goes into a little bit more depth on this. The study looks at best practices for developing and implementing evaluation toolkits. If anyone is interested in the issue of PCV evaluation capacity building, please approach me after the session. I'll be here for the rest of the week and be happy to talk a little bit more in detail some of the findings that the study covers. And then finally, when we talk about moving the field forward, seeking inspiration and finding innovative forms to professionalize evaluations in the field, experts point to two things specifically. On the one hand, they really value the exchange with peers. This can be both informal, so one-on-one conversations with your personal network that you build over time, but also formalized networks, so evaluation discussion spaces within PCV networks, for instance. Conversations like today, there's really an emphasis on creating interactive spaces where you can safely exchange on common challenges, address specific issues, and share your experiences. And experts also find inspiration in related fields that have more extensive evaluation expertise. That can be, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, public health or criminology. So we as a field also need to think more strategically how we can develop a stronger interdisciplinary approach. How can we reach out to other fields, invite them to conversations like today where we talk about evaluation, especially because some of the challenges are shared, and also how can we invite ourselves to evaluation conferences in other disciplines, for instance, and strengthen the collaboration. The other part of this is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. As a researcher, we always have to advocate for more research. But just to say that our experts really did highlight that researchers drive innovation in this space. They move the field forward when it comes to the topic of evaluation, and that especially transnational exchange is also valued. So really creating spaces for people to exchange with each other also beyond the own national context. If any of this sounds remotely interesting to you, there's a QR code for the full report, very accessible 60-page report. There's an executive summary, which I encourage you to read, that is way shorter. Otherwise, the title of my contribution today in the agenda is also the title of the report. And then finally, we always love to talk about evaluation. It's a small space. If you're remotely working on evaluation or thinking about it, please do approach me in the course of the next days. I'd love to have a conversation, or feel free to also drop me an email at the named email address.